Hello, my name is Sarah Shaw, and I am the training director with the North Carolina Democratic Party's coordinated campaign. Today, we're going to talk about how to use an OpenVPB or Open Virtual Phone Bank link to make calls from the comfort and safety of your home. These calls will have a significant impact on our ability to elect Joe Biden, re-elect Governor Roy Cooper, send Cal Cunningham to the U.S. Senate, elect more Democrats to Congress, and support other statewide and local Democrats, and flip our state legislature. So thank you for joining us. Let's get started. So today we're going to talk about who we are calling through these phone banks, why we are calling, and how to effectively make those calls. So who we are calling registered Democrats across North Carolina. And so if you are an in-state North Carolinian volunteer, you will be paired with a local organizer. And so you will be calling directly into your communities and neighborhoods. And why we are calling. So we are calling these voters to do a few things. One, we want to share COVID resources. We know that cases are increasing and we want to make sure that voters have access to resources and information. So in the script that you'll see in a minute, you'll see that we have the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services website and phone number provided. So if the voter would like that information, you'll be positioned to share that. The main point of the script, though, is we are trying to ID how these voters feel and how they're going to vote in the elections so that we can target our turnout efforts in the fall. So you'll be asking voters, if we can count on their support for a few different candidates and in a few different races. And that'll determine, our outreach to them moving forward between now and November. So everybody who says they're undecided about a candidate or a race will hear a whole lot more from us between now and Election Day. And then the third goal, anybody that understands what's at stake and will be supporting the Democrats, we want to recruit more volunteers. It's going to take an army to beat Trump and Tillis and company. So we want to be mobilizing the largest volunteer base in North Carolina history. All right, so how to make these calls. So you should have received from your organizer or someone on NCDP staff a link to the Open Virtual Phone Bank website. This link is targeted just for voters in your community, so in your county. And what you're going to do when you click on that link is you're going to click on this blue Get Started button. Now, if you have not made calls before, you might not have an action ID. And so when you click on the Get Started button, you'll be prompted to create what's called an action ID. So it's free. And what you're going to do is just follow the steps. You'll need to create a username, enter your email address to create your ID. And then once you have an ID, you'll log in with that action ID username and password. If you've already created an action ID, either because you've made calls with us or through other campaigns, you'll be able to log in immediately and start making calls. So once you log in, you'll immediately be taken to a person's profile. And on that profile, you're going to see a lot of information about the voters. So their name, where they live, their districts, their party registration, their age. So that'll help, inform how you conduct that call. You'll also see their phone number. So when you call them, you're going to call, you're going to wait for it to ring a few times. And then let's say, this person's name is Keita and you're unable to talk to Keita. Then you're going to click this I couldn't reach Keita button and select the appropriate option on their profile. So if the person is not home, so if you get a voicemail or an answering machine, we are not leaving messages at this time. So you would mark not home for that. And everybody marks not home is just going to be put back into the queue so that hopefully someone will reach them the next time. You would also put not home, if someone else picks up and they say, oh, they're not home right now, they're at work, you'd put not home. Refused is if someone picks up, but then you start talking, you're like, hi, I'm Sarah with the North Carolina Democratic Party, and you hear a click because they've hung up. So if someone hangs up on you, you're going to mark refused. If someone, is rude, you're going to mark refused. Or if they say things like, how did you get my number? Don't ever call me again. You're going to mark refused because they are refusing the call. Deceased. So we hope you don't encounter a lot of this, but this, if someone says that that person you're trying to reach passed away, you would mark deceased. Moved. This happens a lot with roommate situations. So if you ask to speak with someone, and they say, oh, they actually moved a few months ago, you would mark moved. Call back. So this is if someone says, oh, we're having dinner right now, or now's not a good time, can you call back later? You would mark call back. Busy is if you hear that busy line, that signal. Wrong number, you ask to speak with the person and they say there's no one here by that name, you have the wrong number. Disconnected is if you hear that disconnected dial tone. And other language is if they are speaking a language other than English. Okay, so once, let's say you do get to talk to the correct person, so now you're talking to Kita, you'll follow the script. Now, the script is just a guide, so you do not need to follow it word by word. In fact, we would encourage you to personalize it. But the first part of the script is a COVID check-in. So you are, going to ask this voter if they're doing okay and if they need access to resources. So the official script reads something like, hi, may I please speak with Kita? Good evening. I'm Sarah from the North Carolina Democratic Party in Raleigh. As we continue to safeguard against the COVID-19 outbreak, we wanted to ensure you are protecting your own health and well-being during this crisis. Please check out the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services information on COVID-19 at ncdhhs.gov/coronavirus or call 211 for the most up-to-date information on COVID-19 in North Carolina. We realize while this public health outbreak is changing the way North Carolinians live their daily lives, we are continuing to work towards this critical upcoming election. Okay, so again, it's a COVID check-in and then pivoting to the election. In terms of tips for this part, to me personally, that first part of the script feels a little bit long. So I normally, turn the COVID check-in into a question rather than reading off the website and the phone number. So for example, I might say something like, hi, I'm Sarah with the North Carolina Democratic Party. How are you? Great. Well, I know we're all continuing to safeguard against the COVID-19 outbreak, and I wanted to share that I have the website and phone number for the Department of Health and Human Services. Would you like that information? So again, I'm turning it into a question. I'm asking the voter if they want it, and if they say yes, I'll share the website and phone number. Most of the time, they're going to say no, and so then you can immediately pivot to talking about the upcoming election. So the main part of the script is this candidate survey, and throughout the campaign, the questions we ask exactly the order, the how many, the number of them might change, but right now we have 6 candidate ID questions. And so you'll just start by saying, at this time, do you plan on supporting Joe Biden for president? Now, how that person responds, once they respond, you're going to select from the drop-down menu the appropriate response. So a 1 is if they're a strong Dem, 2 if they're a lean Dem, 3 undecided, 4 lean GOP or Republican, 5 strong Republican. So, you're not necessarily saying on a 1 to 5 scale, will you be supporting Joe Biden? It's more a subjective rating based on how they answer the question. So, for example, if I said, do you plan on supporting Joe Biden for president? And they said, yes, absolutely, Trump has to go. Right, that is a strong Democrat, so you would put a 1 strong Dem. If they sound like they're leaning that way, but they're not 100% sure, you would say something, like that would sound something like, do you plan on supporting Joe Biden for president? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I got to think about it a little more, but I'm pretty sure I'll be voting for Biden, right? That would be a lean Dem. And the same would be the case on the Republican side. Now, if you're ever unsure as to whether someone is a lean versus a strong, just select the lean option, as we're going to be more likely to follow up with them. So once you ask about Biden for president, you'll go through the rest of the list. So you'll say, okay, great. What about Governor Cooper for re-election? You'll mark the appropriate response. And Cal Cunningham for U.S. Senate. Mark the response. Okay, and how about the Democrats running for the Council of State? So the Council of State are the other statewide positions, such as the Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor, State Treasurer. Will you be voting for Democrats running for those offices? Mark their option. And the Democrat running for Congress in your district and the state legislature. So again, we want you to try to get through all of these questions. Now, if at the outset, right, when you first start asking about Joe Biden, if the person is really enthusiastic and so they say something like, yeah, I'm voting like straight ticket Democrat, anybody with a D next to their name has got my vote. Then you can just kind of combine all of the questions into one, and say something like, great, so that means Joe Biden for president, Governor Cooper for re-election, Cal Cunningham for Senate, Democrats up and down the ballot, Congress, state legislature, Council of State. And, if they're like, yes, absolutely, then you could just fill in the drop-down menus accordingly. However, if they're not that confident, if they might have different opinions about the different races, we do ask that you ask each question separately then, so that we have the most accurate and comprehensive data. All right, then once you are done asking those questions, if the person is supportive of Democrats, we want to make a strong volunteer pitch. So you'll say something like, that's terrific. In the coming months, we need people just like you in Raleigh or wherever their city is, calling voters in your community in support of the Democratic Party. Can I count on you to join me in calling voters to help elect Democratic candidates up and down the ballot? And then you'll see a drop-down menu with a yes, no, maybe later option. I would encourage you all to assume that the volunteer, or the voter rather, wants to volunteer, right? If they're supporting Democrats, they probably understand the urgency of the election and what's at stake. And so let's try not to take no as the first answer, right? Let's try to convert all the no's into at least a maybe or a later and ideally a yes. You can talk about why you're volunteering. You can, let them know that we're really flexible with the schedule, and this is something that they can do from the comfort and safety of their home for as much time as they can give. So, if they want to volunteer, you all do not need to worry about scheduling the logistics or anything like that. You will just say, great, we'll have an organizer in your neighborhood reach out to you about when you can volunteer. So again, we have staff serving every county in the state, and so we will follow up to schedule them for a volunteer shift, train them, share the call links, and so forth. And so just let them know that we'll follow up. You can grab their email address. There's a note section at the bottom of the profile that we'll look at in a second, and you can put their email address there. With the email, even if they say no to volunteering, let's go ahead and try to ask for their email so we can keep them in the loop. So there's an ask about for the email, and again, you would just record that in the note section. You'll also see in the script an ask about supporter housing. It's completely optional given the COVID-19 situation. We're not, really asking about supporter housing with most calls. But if you feel it is appropriate, or if the person volunteers to house supporters, you would say something like, as we are starting our program here in North Carolina, we are looking for people who are willing to house staff and volunteers when it is safe to do so. Do you think you would be willing to house a staffer or volunteers for a short period of time? If they say yes, then that box at the bottom that says 20, supporter housing, you would go ahead and check that box. And again, let them know that staff will follow up. And that's pretty much the entirety of the script. At the end, no matter how the call went, positive, negative, they're voting for Democrats, they're voting for Republicans, they're volunteering, they're not. We want to end on a positive note. And so, you're going to want to thank them for their time, wish them a good evening, thank them for their support if they're Democrats, and then move on to your next call. And anything that, you have, if they have questions you didn't know how to answer, or if they want to volunteer and need more information, there is a notes section at the bottom of the profile. And so feel free to enter any of your notes there, and our staff will follow up. And when you're done, you will just, you'll click next call, and then you'll see a new person's name and phone number, and go through the script again. So let's talk about how to do this effectively. So here are just some tips. The first is to smile and dial. So as cheesy as that might sound, people can hear your smile through the phone. So you want to make sure that your tone is energetic, positive, upbeat, enthusiastic, that you are conveying that you're really excited to talk to them. People are going to respond better to that. They're going to engage with you for longer. They're going to be more likely to say yes to volunteering. If you sound like this is your 100th call and you're tired and exhausted, people aren't going to react as well to that. So just reflect on, your tone. The second is don't dwell. So some of your calls, they might be negative. People might be rude. They might hang up on you, or you're going to have a lot of people, most people aren't going to pick up the phone. You might have some wrong numbers, disconnected lines. So what I will say to that is, the reason we make so many calls, we are, it is about the positive conversations. We're trying to call every registered Democrat and Democratic leaning unaffiliated voter in North Carolina this summer. So, of course, there will be some bad calls, but just let it go. You will have many more positive interactions. And all of the data you receive from the calls is useful to us, right? So, if everybody for whom there's a wrong number or disconnected line, like that information is helping us clean up our list, such that the closer and closer we get to November, we have better and better lists. The third, so assume support with volunteer asks. So this means that, if someone is supporting the Democrats and they understand what's at stake, let's assume that they want to volunteer their time and get involved. So, don't take their first no or their first I'm too busy as an answer. Really try to push them and let them know what's at stake. And the last is to know your lines. So, before you make your first call, go ahead, take a couple minutes to review the script. If you're by yourself, I would still encourage you to say it out loud and practice, in front of a mirror or something, or with somebody else over the phone. It's just going to make you feel more comfortable and sound more natural and authentic to voters. And that wraps up our training. So again, next steps, each of you, if you're connected with an organizer or NCDP staff, you should have a link to start making calls. And if not, please reach out to your local organizer to provide that link. And thank you again for joining this training, and also for making calls. Every call is going to count. We can't wait to see what happens November 3rd. We are confident that we are going to send Democrats to the White House, to Raleigh, and there will be many victories up and down the ballot. So thank you for your time.